Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us today in this second of our webinar series on access to TB medicines hosted by UCL TB. My name is Jess Potter, and I'm a consultant in respiratory medicine and lead of the TB service in a London hospital. I also co-chair the network UK Academics and Professionals to End TB. I'm joined by my co-host today, Ilaria Motta, formerly of MSF and currently the Principal Research Fellow at the MRC Clinical Trials Unit at UCL. Last time we had some brilliant speakers providing a broad outline on challenges experienced trying to access TB medicines. And there's a recording of that webinar on the UCL TB website, and I'll post it in the chat shortly. Today, we're going to focus on Rifapentine. We've chosen Rifapentine as it is on the essential list of medicines from the WHO, and yet there have been significant challenges accessing it for people affected by TB, particularly in low TB incidence countries. Now, we were due to start with Christoph Lange, but unfortunately he had his laptop stolen and then has had to go back to try and retrieve it. And although he sent us a brilliant recording, the sound quality isn't quite there. However, I have managed to check what he's saying, and I'm going to retell one of the, some of the key messages that he's given, and Gabriella is also going to cover some of those other key messages. We will have, so I will open with Christoph's story by way of introduction to Gabriella Ferlazzo from MSF's Access campaign, who's going to give a more depth analysis of the issues, including feedback from the recent workshop that was held on this topic in Berlin, and the excellent guide that's been produced by TAG on Rifapentine for those of us who are trying to get secure access for people affected by TB in our own countries. We'll put a link to that in the chat as well. Following Gabriella's talk, we will open the floor, as I know there are people in the audience who have specific experience gaining access to Rifapentine for people affected by TB in their country. And I think understanding how people have gone about that process and hearing those specific examples will hopefully be really useful as a way to taking this forwards. So, in the words of Professor Christoph Lange, Rifapentine was licensed by the FDO in 2000 and was submitted to the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, in 1999, so many years ago. But the EMA had questions to the patent holders relating to preclinical evaluations. And Sanofi, who were the patent holder around that time, then withdrew the submission from the EMA and never renewed it. Subsequently, the license ran out, and so other drug companies could have submitted a license request to the EMA at that time, but there was little evidence to drive the demand for Rifapentine. This has only really appeared in later years. So currently, we're at a situation where anyone wanting to submit a licensing request to EMA would have to potentially repeat the preclinical evaluations which were requested by the EMA 20 years ago, and would also have to be a pharmaceutical company, so no mean feat. And that's because the trials that have been undertaken previously with the drugs that have been produced are not quite up to regulatory requirements, even though they are authorized in some other countries. There are other barriers, of course, to procurement as well, and there are also alternative ways of procuring the drug, and we're going to hear about a lot of that detail from Gabriella. So I'm going to hand over to Gabriella, I think, directly, unless Ilaria wants to add anything at that point.
I just want to introduce Gabriella formally. Apart from being a friend and a colleague in Access Campaign, Gabriella is an infectious disease physician, and she works as TB medical advisor, Médecins Sans Frontières Access Campaign, and also as independent consultant for other international organizations. And she started her professional engagement in humanitarian settings in 2008, working initially as field clinicians in the context of different migration, TB HIV and Ebola projects, then as TB HIV technical and strategic advisor for MSF in several African, Asian, and ECA countries. Gabriella's current research and advocacy activities focusing on the new TB, drug-resistant TB treatment and TB diagnostic and prevention strategy aimed at improving provision of TB, drug-resistant TB care for the most vulnerable population, including children.
So thanks a lot for the introduction, and Ilaria and Jess for organizing this webinar, because it's true, as Jess and also Professor Lange were saying, we need to talk about this drug, which is an essential drug. And what I will do is to briefly provide you with a summary of the evidence. I believe also many healthcare workers among the participants. So just a reminder, the evidence is strong. We will touch base on the latest recommendations, international recommendations from WHO on rifapentine-based regimens. And I will give you all the references, so we won't go into the details of each study. But I think the key point that we need to address is, why do we want shorter regimens, and the key role of this drug, rifapentine, in providing these shorter regimens, which are, from my perspective, essential to ensure the best standards of care to our patients. And we will touch base on the challenges, trying to compare a bit the situation in low and middle income countries and in our Western world, with a focus on the EU and the UK. And if time allows, I believe it does, we will have the time, we can discuss about some recent collaborations and advocacy initiatives at the international level, and also what each one of us can do to contribute to solve the barriers and to address these challenges. So I will start with something that anyone a bit working on TB, and especially you participants to these webinars, already know, but I think it remains shocking to see that, as the WHO Global TB Report reminds us every year, that tuberculosis remains the leading, in 2022 it was together with COVID, but the leading infectious disease killer in the world. And since we're going to talk about, the focus will be on TB preventive treatment and prevention, how we can avoid for people to get sick. If you look at the second infographic, you will see that we are very, very behind in reaching the targets and the milestones that were set for this important treatment, which is the preventive treatment. And these targets were set by all countries, by the world, at UN high-level meetings. The last one was in September of last year. And then I would like to thank my colleagues from the Access Campaign, because they managed to translate these statistics that sometimes are hard to swallow into a dramatic infographic. And if you're interested, there is also a fact sheet on this, saying that the most vulnerable population that we care about, so children, among them, one child dies of TB every 3 minutes. So let's focus on rifapentine. What is this drug? It's nothing new. It's actually a very, very old antibiotic that was first discovered in Italy in 1957. So we are almost 70 years past. And the evidence, and we will touch base on this, shows that it's key in shortening treatment regimens, both for TB prevention and active disease. I won't go through the details of the timeline, but what you need to capture here is that, thanks to ongoing research, clinical trials of very high quality, randomized clinical trials, but also programmatic experience, over the last 10 years, I would say, we reached some important milestones. We have approval, unfortunately not in the EU, but the US FDA approved the use of rifapentine together with INH, with isoniazid, for shorter TB treatments. And then, starting from there, we started having international recommendations by WHO regarding these new innovative treatment regimens that are called 3HP and 1HP. And very recently also new evidence showed that we can use rifapentine to shorten drug-susceptible TB treatment. So to say that in the previous slide, the key word is short. Why do we want shorter regimens? This does not apply clearly only to tuberculosis, but can apply to any disease. But if you think about the TB epidemics affecting the most vulnerable and the poorest countries and contexts, if we have a shorter regimens, I think the dream for all of us working on TB is that one day we will have a 1 week treatment for drug susceptible and drug resistant TB, and maybe one day preventive treatment. This is, I can say, I think, a dream. But we are moving forward with shorter regimens. And this is key from an individual perspective for our patient who can get back to school, to work, and be less affected by the catastrophic cost of tuberculosis. It is much more acceptable and to take a shorter regimen. There, we have evidence showing there is no problem with resistance amplification. Actually, it's the contrary. And also from a health system perspective, we will need less human resources. The programmatic aspects will be much better if we have very short regimens, and all the money that is saved can be used to implement and scale up other key activities. So very briefly, looking into the latest WHO recommendations on TB preventive treatment. This is the Module 1, came out in 2020. And for the first time in these recommendations, we see that 2 rifapentine-based regimens are recommended for TPT, so for treatment of TB infection. And you see that it might take a bit of time to go into all the details of these options, because we have several options. Some of them are not easily available, we'll see. But historically, we always, the countries and most of them still use the INH, the isoniazid 6 or 9 month treatment as a TPT. And actually, there are recommendations also for longer treatments with isoniazid up to 36 months as a proxy of lifelong in high TB burden settings. Then with time, we got new options as very good, the very good one, 3RH, so a daily combination, which exists in fixed dose combination of rifampicin and isoniazid. But then we see, and this is the focus for us, these 2 options, and they are a game changer, because the first one is 3HP. It's the combination, and we will see which kind of formulations exist in fixed dose of rifapentine and isoniazid given once a week for 12 weeks, so for 3 months. It's a change. If you need to take only once a week your treatment instead of every day, it's a big change. And these recommendations apply to anyone, so even children, but over the age of 2 years old. And this is because the data available at the time and the formulations for pediatric formulations were lacking. So only children older than 2 were included. The other option we see is the 1HP. So 1 month of daily rifapentine and isoniazid. And this is recommended for older children, older than 13 years old. Well, maybe I go back here because I think one important element is that there is it's recognized the shorter regimens are better. But of course, we need to consider the different aspects and different challenges of availability and age, safety, context, and of course, registration. And we will talk about that. So again, the goal here is not to go into the details of all the studies, but just to say that the evidence behind these regimens is very high. There were randomized clinical trials that, as you know, are the best standard for research, multi-country, both on 3HP and 1HP. The first one was Prevent TB, published on New England Journal of Medicine in 2011, so a long time ago, and showed, I think the key element here are that 3HP was non-inferior to the standard of care of 9 months of isoniazid. And there were higher completion rates, also extremely high in children. The other study that came out later on 1HP that had an important, a key role in policy change was the brief TB from the ACTG group that looked also at non-inferiority of 1HP versus the 9 months isoniazid, and included, the population included was only people living with HIV and older than 13 years. Same results, 1HP non-inferior, and the population that received 1HP was more likely to complete treatment. Beside this, we got confirmation of these results also in programmatic settings. And again, you will find all the references. I will give you the details, and also an amazing guide that I've been using. It just came out from TAG, from Treatment Action Group. But just to say that studies have been continuing. And so we do have evidence related to drug-drug interactions with dolutegravir, and other evidence that are coming out in specific populations, including children. So 1 minute maybe on the role of rifapentine in drug-susceptible TB. So we're talking now about active disease and not prevention. In 2022, we have the latest recommendations from WHO on treatment for DSTB, and we see that beside other new things coming out in children, a shorter regimen in children with non-severe disease. But for the first time, we have this recommendation on a shorter regimen for adults older and adolescents older than 12 years of age, even with severe disease, pulmonary TB, that looked into let's say, a new composition of regimen. And you don't need to know all this by heart. Just to say that it was a 4-month regimen. The first 2 months were isoniazid, we know this drug, rifapentine, the new one, moxifloxacin, which is an antibiotic that we use a lot in TB, but also in other bacterial infections, and pyrazinamide, followed by 2 months of HPM. I won't repeat all the names. So the results are great in the sense that non-inferiority was shown, and this is published on the New England Journal of Medicine 2021. But maybe at this stage, just at this stage, the international community might be a bit less enthusiastic about this regimen for some challenges, in the sense that we do not have fixed dose combinations, so the number of drugs needed become very high. There is an increased cost coming both from rifapentine and moxifloxacin, and as we will see, the availability of rifapentine is challenging, and so to consider that we have 10,600,000 people affected by TB every year. Most of these cases are drug-susceptible TB, so you would need a lot of rifapentine to scale up this regimen. I will move now to some more access issues and explanations around rifapentine. Please consider I'm a clinician, and over the last year, I just learned a lot from my colleagues at the pharma department of the Access Campaign and from the international community. So I will summarize what you see in this slide by saying that we have several appropriate formulations that could allow us to implement both 3HP and 1HP. So you will see in the first table on the left that we have a fixed dose combination of 3HP that we can use in the more adult population, adolescents, but also a bit the younger ones, depending on weight. Then we have the single tablets of rifapentine and isoniazid to build our 3HP regimen. We do have the possibility to build with the same drugs above the 1HP regimen, so for 1 month. And you can see that I put the sensor here, the pointer, the price increases a bit. And now it's going to be a game changer as well. We also have pediatric dispersible tablets of rifapentine, so lower dose, 150 milligrams, that we can associate with the already existing isoniazid dispersible tablet. So we have the possibility to build our regimens, and if you think about 6 months of isoniazid, which means 180 tablets and another 180 of vitamin B6 that we associate to prevent peripheral neuropathies, the comparison with, let's take 3-HP, it becomes that in an adult, you can give only 3 tablets of 3-HP fixed dose combination once a week for 12 weeks. So in the treatment action group guideline done together with Impact for TB, you will find all the dosing, all the explanations. So I won't spend too much time here. But please consider that also from a pill burden perspective, in most cases, this is really a game changer. Last point here is about price. As you can see in this box here, until not long ago, the price was extremely high, $72. And this is because there was no generic competition. Then generic competition came, and now we have 2 generic manufacturers of Rifapentine from India that, of course, give competition to Sanofi, which is based in France, as Professor Lange was mentioning. And you can see along the years this amazing drop in price, which was due a lot thanks to the generic competition, but also thanks to big advocacy efforts of amazing colleagues and organizations that worked to reduce the price. Okay, so this slide, it comes from the Global TB Report of 2023. So it shows it's not 100% up to date. And I know that some additional countries have managed to get access to Rifapentine, but it shows a bit the situation in terms of countries that have been using Rifapentine in one moment in time. So please take this map as it is, because it doesn't show routine implementation. Okay, it shows where the drug is being used, also including under clinical trials condition. So most of the sub-Saharan Africa region, some countries do have it. I work with Zambia and they implement 3-HP and now they're piloting 1-HP. But many countries are blue because the clinical trials were run there. And if you have a good if you have good eyes, which I don't, but you will see that the European map and the UK and many countries in the European Economic Area, they are white. So it means there was no use. Although, again, I know that the situation has slightly changed. And hello, Maria Isabel, thank you so much for being here. We will hear from the experience of Portugal, that I think it's amazing. Okay. So let's get into a not exhaustive list of challenges in terms of access to this drug and to the Rifapentine-based formulations. The challenges are different between high-income countries and our region and low and middle-income countries. First of all, maybe the common aspect is that policies and recommendations, which might seem strange, especially, I don't know, in Europe or the UK, but they're not always up to date. It takes time to release new guidelines. Sometimes you want expert opinions. Sometimes you need the support to develop new guidelines. So countries have a certain delay. And if there are no clear policies, it might be hard for the implementers, so all of you healthcare workers and any policymaker at a lower level to make the change and scale up the treatment. In our region, so high-income countries, let's say, we know that TB is not a priority. It's not been for decades, and the good side is that the incidence decrease has been achieved over the last few decades. Now we are seeing a situation that is changing. Also, but not only, because of the Ukrainian war and the large influx of refugees to other countries, that we know that Ukraine has a high prevalence of TB and DRTB, but there are other reasons as well. So there is a risk that we are losing all the wins of the last decades in our Western region, let's say. But the key element is that it's not easy, it's not always possible to use and implement and scale up a drug or some regimens if the drug is not registered. And this is the situation in Europe and in the UK, where Rifapentine is not registered at EMA or at the UK regulatory authority, I believe it's called the MHRA, and also at country level. So all this, despite the fact that these formulations have been already pre-qualified. As Professor Lange was saying, EMA, for instance, has been demanding additional studies. And we might wonder, why do we need additional studies if they have been done and these drugs are approved by WHO, which has very strict regulations in approving drugs. And are we saying that it's okay to give these drugs to low and middle income countries for them to use them, but they're not good enough for Europe or for the UK? I think we need to think about this aspect. In any case, the challenges are many. Of course, there is a little demand, extra fees. All this leads to the fact that we do not have registration of Rifapentine in Europe, in the European Economic Area, and in UK, and as far as I know, also in many other high-income countries as Canada or Australia. On the other hand, in low and middle-income countries, we already touched base on the policies. The cost remains a problem. We are talking about massive potential demand of TB prevention is key in for thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. We estimate that 2/3 of the world population is infected with TB, especially in low and middle income countries. So we have the cost challenge, the supply challenges. We know that stockouts happen often, and these are, again, not extensive because the barriers are many. There are many competing health needs and priorities. We need trained human resources. There is also an ongoing fear of resistance when using prevention, while just to say, we don't have to be afraid of that because the importance is to rule out active TB, and then you can safely give TBT. So there are overall major financial and implementation challenges. But in any case, the situation is this one. We have barriers and we cannot implement the shortest, let's say, treatment that we have for TB preventive treatment, especially. So we need solutions. Snapshot, I'm not sure how I'm going with time. I know that I can talk a lot, but I would like to mention a few. These are, again, there are many, many initiatives ongoing, but a few collaboration that are happening, that have been happening over the last period, and some advocacy activities as well. So, we touched base on this workshop. I don't know if there is any WHO colleague online who can add afterwards, but I will try to summarize. So the situation, the challenging situation in Europe, UK, and high-income countries is well known since a few years. And there have been many efforts trying to solve these barriers. But unfortunately, this is not, we are a bit far from finding final solutions, which basically is the registration. So there is a growing attention to this problem, not only for Rifapentine, it's also for other key TB and DRTB drugs. So pediatric formulation of DSTB, they're not registered either. And then if you think about the unacceptable high prices of drug-resistant TB drugs as bedaquiline or linezolid, the Lamani and predominant in high-income countries, there is a problem there as well. So to make it short, there are many actors that are trying to work and coordinate to solve this problem. But the key actors are countries, so the member states, the UK, and all the other country partners in all this. And so WHO convened recently, the beginning of the month, a new, I say new because there was already one in 2022, workshop with key partners and the countries that are affected by this lack of registration, to repeat a bit, to give an overview of the challenges, to present the brainstorm all together on short and long-term solutions, which might include also some flexibility mechanism. And I believe that we will have some experience from Portugal right after me. So there was a great representation of countries, but also partners. And this is what we need. We need to put all our heads together. We need to push, we need to advocate, and we need to find solutions, because the solutions are there, and the legal frameworks are a bit strict in our countries, but we need to find them, okay? Because at the same time, we need to ensure the best standards of care for each and every patient in the world. Just to mention, another MSF-led initiative that includes access to shorter TB preventive treatment is the so-called TACTIC project. It's an international, intersectional, multi-country project that is looking into TACTIC stands for Test, Avoid, Cure TB in Children. Pediatric TB is neglected, is the most neglected problem we have. And so there is this growing efforts in scaling up the best standards of care, introduce through operational research conditions, the new recommendations, and to show and to provide evidence that is so much needed, especially in low and middle income countries. And also, again, it will include access to TPT and shorter TPT. And in parallel to this, we're also conducting a survey on policies and implementations on pediatric TB among the 14 countries that are involved. And we hope that we will be able to share the results by September 2024. I will mention a very last minute received information, which is very useful. So there is an important initiative from Untitled to incentivize the access to the new pediatric formulation of Rifapentine, the dispersible tablets, 150 milligrams. So you can find more information in the link, it's focusing on low and middle income countries, but please take a look, because your country could benefit from this initiative. I will conclude by saying that although, of course, we need high-level policymakers to put all the efforts possible to change the situation, but it's not only them. Each and every one of us we can do something, and so maybe just some potential activities for each one of us. Go back home. Go back to your hospital and or your clinic or your workplace, and share information. That's the first aspect, because many people do not know about TB and about TB preventive treatment, about Rifapentine. Take a look at your country policies and guidelines. Are they in line with the latest and best evidence-based standards of care? If they're not, do something, say something, reach out to anyone who could make this change, and demand for policies and guidelines to be updated. Take a look if you have Rifapentine. You don't know, maybe your country has used some flexibility mechanism and has managed to import some quantities. Take a look at the formulations that you might have or may not have, and please, if you want to join us in the fight, in the advocacy around all this and around other key TB drugs, both in high and low and middle income countries, we are here, and we are going to look forward to having you joining us. So last slide is just some references, not exhaustive, but I really recommend to take a look at this guide. It just came out, the updated version in 2024 in April, and thanks a lot for all the colleagues that helped also with the key information for this presentation.
Before opening the floor for question, the idea was to, as you said, share some practical experience from some countries. And I would glad if Isabel from Portugal she kindly accepted really last minute to share. Isabel Carvalho is from the National TV program in Portugal. And after we also have Judith Bruchfeld from Sweden. I hope I say your name well, and also we can have their experience from Sweden. So if we can start with Isabel and then to Judith. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and it's very, very important to talk about these medicines, and I congratulate you and your team for the initiative. In Portugal, I have tried to systematize all the steps we took during the Rifapentine acquisition. So at first, we started to publish a national advertisement and recommendation. That was very important because we were working together with our health products and medicine agency, that is a government structure. And after publishing this national recommendation, we published a statement defining Rifapentine as an essential medicine. After that, we were able to request an exceptional acquisition, an exceptional authorization. Each region, we have 7 regions in Portugal. Each region could now start to requesting Rifapentine. But at the same time, we contacted directly Sanofi, and at the beginning, Sanofi told us we couldn't be able to commit and to sell Rifapentine to Portugal because we are a low incident country, although not so low as we wished. But we presented them the expected TBI patients based on our previous year's numbers. We mainly focus our attention to risk groups, especially migrants, and we intended to use Rifapentine during 1 month because we wanted to increase the treatment success. So after that, after some meetings, Sanofi said, okay, it's very important to present numbers, and numbers on TBI are very, very higher compared to, especially in Europe, especially in low incidence countries, because we have migrants, of course. I think it was important, and it had a higher impact to Sanofi than compared with the active TB numbers. After that, each region started their own acquisition, but we stated a national commitment to Sanofi. So we had a compromise to buy an expected number of pills, of medicines. We could after that we bought about until now about 217,000 pills of Rifapentine, 115 milligrams. We can treat until now about 2,500 patients with TBI. Each pill costed €1, about it. It's more expensive than I think with the global drug facility we could. Each pill costs about 72 centimes, I think. The other problem, it's not a sustainable acquisition. we are based, of course, the guarantee to continue having Rifapentine in the next year is based on Sanofi acceptance. I think it's a way to solve this problem at the moment, but it's not sustainable. So we need to have other measures, and I think it's very, very important to have united action, not only one country, because only one country can manage and having Rifapentine, but it's not, the price is expensive, we cannot negotiate price, and we cannot guarantee that we'll keep going on having Rifapentine. The other problem we saw in Portugal, although we have about 1,500 patients of active TB each year, clinicians, they are not updated. So, of course, we perform several meetings before Rifapentine and after Rifapentine, but some of them keep using isoniazid. So we need to increase their literacy, their keeping them updated, as Gabriella told us. And that's all.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Hand over to Judith.
I recognize a lot of issues that you talked about, Isabel. We actually started, the thing was when these studies came out, the results from the 3HP study came out, we actually took it up because we had a colleague that was working part-time in the Swedish Medical Agency. And then we had a discussion regarding access of Rifapentine. So they actually helped us. The Swedish Medical Agency have licensed Rifapentine for use in Sweden. So that's why we can access it. But as Isabel said, it's very irregular. There are stockouts, and then we have a standing order regarding Rifapentine. So sometimes we get a lot, and then there's nothing for several months. So what we do, we use it, but I would like to use it much more often. And we've also used the 1HP regimen now for selected cases where we are in a rush to sort of, like donors, living transplant donors with TB infection. Then we've used it like 3 or 4 times now. But and we've actually published regarding feasibility, and the patients with TB infection, they adore these shorter regimens. So we have 4 months of rifampicin. Somebody is shouting here. Yes, 4 months of rifampicin as our standard treatment. But if we have younger patients, teenagers, young migrants, we try to give them 3HP. But the problem is that we have to save a full course. We have to save it at our own. We have a small pharmacy at our outpatient clinic, but we have these regimens as recommended. We published our own TB guidelines, national TB guidelines, 2022, and revised them 2023. So these regimens are absolutely in our recommendations, and we advocate for shorter regimens. And we have, from those that we have treated, we have very good, adherence, very little adverse events. So we are frustrated also here, although we can access it, but it's not sustainable. I perfectly agree with Isabel that we can't go on like this.
Yeah. Thank you, Judith. And if I understood correctly, like Isabel, also you directly contact Sanofi or through the the Swedish Medical Agency, and they...
No, we had no contact with Sanofi. It was
Okay.
our Swedish medical agency that actually licensed it for us, and we have a standing license. You know, TB in Sweden, it's uncommon, but very common in migrants. So we have centralized clinics in mainly at infectious disease clinics nowadays for TB care, TB prevention. And so we in Stockholm, it's only at Karolinska University Hospital that we actually deal with TB, including prevention and contact tracing, everything. We do everything. So we have about 450, 500 active TB cases per year. But we have a lot of screening. I mean, for biologics, it would be very nice if we could use these shorter regimens. We still use INH 9 months for, our immune suppressed patients. But yeah, this has been a discussion as far as I can remember, but luckily, we had an interested colleague at the Swedish Medical Agency who actually saw the need and then helped us out.
Thank you. Really helpful. Great. So let's open the floor for any question from the audience, and then over to Jess.
Yes, if anyone does have a question, then please put your hand up, or you can post it in the chat. We've already got one. Great. How can you ensure migrants on the move in Europe can have access to different TB, drug-resistant TB treatments or preventive treatments? Is there any way for undocumented migrants to access these facilities? So really great question, and particularly for people who are moving across countries within Europe, and how we strengthen our ability to provide care and treatment to those people is a really key question for Europe. Gabriella, I wonder if you want to come in on that.
So, hi, it's great to see you there. Sorry, lots of friends from the TB world coming up. Look, I don't think there is one answer, in the sense that I believe that the situation in terms of access to care and TB care for migrants might be slightly different depending on each country. I know there are some colleagues from Italy online. I don't know if they want to share their experience, but maybe the key point would be indeed to understand if undocumented migrants, first of all, can have any kind of access to care, what happens to them, because many countries implement actually a very strict screening at entry. So full investigations to exclude TB. Some countries implement systematic chest X-ray. TB screening, symptom screening should be there. You can take a look if there is access to diagnostics and so on. And what happens to those who are found not to have active TB and come from high TB prevalent settings. Another population, for instance, is also prisoners that we really need to look at. But for the sake of time, I did not go into details of all the aspects, but indeed, it's a key population, the ones of people on the move who could benefit from the 1 month regimen. That would be fantastic. Or even take away 3 HP, so very few number of pills, total doses, and just give. We try to do that with MSF in the sub-Saharan region and in other contexts as well. A package of care, differentiated service delivery, DSD, we talk about that. So what can we do to put the patient at center? So I'm sorry, I cannot tell you, do they have access to any kind of TPT in each country? I believe it depends a lot on the health system and whether they reach any form of care or not. But definitely we should push for the shorter regimens in this population.
I think Judith has her hand up as well.
Yes, no, I just wanted to say that if we have undocumented migrants also, but what we usually do both with active and also TB prevention is if they are suddenly moved or have to leave the country, we actually provide them with drugs for at least a couple of months, and then we write a certificate regarding treatment, and that they should, inform the authorities in the country where they are going for monitoring of adverse events, including blood tests. So we try to provide what we can from our side.
And I think this probably signals a bit of a shift away from that really more patriarchal control,
yes,
to empowering people to be, responsible for their own health and giving them tools to be able to do that, particularly with latent TB. And then there are the kind of legal and policy, and then which are frameworks which are obviously shaped by politics. And I know that there's been big elections across Europe, and also in the UK. And certainly from the UK experience, we know that although TB care, latent TB, active TB is provided free to anyone, whether you're undocumented or not, there are other barriers. In the UK, we call it the hostile environment, that deter people from seeking help when they're unwell. And those are the types of things that we need to overcome, just to signpost people towards PCAM, the platform for the international care of undocumented migrants, who do a lot of advocacy work in this area, and have produced some really useful kind of advocacy documents and tools. I can see another question. So Chiara from Italy, migrants have access to TB treatment by law with several barriers. Yes, so some of those barriers that we were just talking about now, and language, really, really key. Unlike is that Mark Littman? Yes, unlike TB disease, TB infection and its treatment is not generally systematically recorded. Might this be an important component of expanding treatment for TB infection? Just so we have idea of those numbers that Gabriella was talking, Isabel was talking about being so important in terms of convincing Sanofi that it's a market worth investing in. Is anyone else in Europe collecting that data routinely? Shake of the head from Judith. Isabel, do you collect the latent TB numbers?
In Portugal, we only collect, but it's very important, the patients that started treatment with TBI, patients with latent TB that starts treatment. And we record which treatment, and if it was a success, if they left the country, if they interrupted treatment, and other comorbidities that are important to analyze later. In Portugal, we really have the possibility to include all regular and irregular migrants in the system. It's a provisional interest at the system, so they get all everything free of charge, all concerned to TB. The problem is and I think that's happening in all other countries. They don't know how to enter the system. So we can say we have an outpatient TB center that have an open door and can receive any patient, any one of us, any irregular migrant, but they don't know how to get there. Also, of course, we have the stigma. They don't want to be seen entering there. But we can really, as I think all of you mentioned a little bit, we can offer an integrated care. It's not only TB, but HIV, but social, everything we can offer besides TB. So I think that's the strategy. I think it's also very, very important to have a better surveillance on TBI. I think it's very, very important.
And just a quick question about that I guess how people are responding to rifapentine. I have very little experience. We have almost no access in the UK. Any increase in side effects that you've noticed, or very similar to 3RH, which is the thing that we often use?
No, just as Judith said previously, we at this time, at this moment, because we don't have a sustainable acquisition, we need to guarantee pills to 1 month treatment for each patient. We only start a patient after guaranteeing we have the total number of pills. And we don't have side effects, but it's important to know. 219, we had for the first time Rifapentine in Portugal. It's not we used the 3-month treatment, but patient didn't like. So we weren't using in migrants. We were using in everyone wanted to start Rifapentine, but they said that were many pills. They don't want it. They prefer to take one each day, and they refused. After some time, they left Rifapentine. It was not a good experience. And
can I just comment, Isabel, because we don't have the same experience, but we focused mainly on these young migrants, and they liked it once a week, and we used video assisted ingestion. They had to come for the first few weeks, and then they had this video assisted, and that worked perfectly fine. What we saw in some individuals, because it's a higher rifapentine dose, but also a quite high INH dose, 900 milligrams. But the rifapentine was this influenza-like adverse event with aches and things like that. But with the 1 HP, it's very well tolerated because it's a normal INH dose, and it's also less rifapentine. But we don't have enough to sort of. I would like to give everyone this, but it's not possible at the moment.
Thanks so much, Judith. That's really fascinating, and we've come to the end of our time, but there's still so much more to discuss and to learn from each other. So hopefully we can take these conversations forwards. I thank you, Gabriella, for setting the scene so brilliantly, and to Isabel and Judith for sharing their experiences, and to everyone for attending. I think this is the start of work that we all need to do, both collectively and individually within our countries, to advocate for access to this. I think that what we've heard today is that there is a need, and there is a significant need, particularly as we move to greater coverage of TBI treatment. There is particular populations who would strongly benefit from this. And Judith, I was particularly hearing, about those people you want to really get treatment done quickly, who are poorly and are at risk of reactivation of their TB, as well as those people who are on the move. And we need to push Sanofi into helping to provide that medication and think outside of the box in how to get it in our countries. In terms of how we move forwards, I know that the WHO are continuing their meeting, and they've got they're doing lots of brainstorming with lots of people. They've got lots of representation from across Europe, so hopefully there will be some solutions through that. In terms of in-country, we were thinking about producing a generic letter that you can use to write to those people who are in charge of policy making or decision making, who can help shift the dial in terms of making this accessible, and then sending you all away with that, and you can translate it and adapt it. So that's perhaps something that we could work on together, to be able to share with people in different countries. But we're open to ideas. We've got a good network of people. We've got a good network through the WHO, and great work going on through TAG. So this isn't about recreating the wheel, but more about broadening our reach in terms of raising this as an issue, and making sure that everyone knows what is going on. So I'm going to end there. Thank you so much to everyone for joining. Thank you, Ilaria, for organising everything, and everyone for talking. And we will think about what we might need to talk about next time. But if anyone's got any ideas or things that they would like to be covered, particularly if it was useful to focus on this particular drug, we can think about other drugs. Do get in touch.